right now. Uh, I've been using since 2009. So I was actually in grad school at the time. And I had received some critiques from professors and whatnot. And I was really pretty open to advice and whatnot. So I really took things to heart. And I was working on little tiny pencil drawings at the time. That would take me sometimes like a month to do because it was like very detailed, delicate pencil work. And so they were like, you're in grad school, you really have to be working through a lot of ideas and concepts with your work. So you need to start thinking about how to do that. And so I was doing some experiments in my studio and a few things weren't working out. But in the previous couple months, there was like 3 different people that suggested I try powdered graphite. They didn't give me any sort of like guidance on how to use it, but they said, you know, maybe this would be a good material for you. And when 3 people tell me something, I feel like it must be fate. And so I had this can of graphite in my studio, and I grabbed it one day out of frustration, and I grabbed the largest piece of paper that I had, which was Stonehenge. It was like the biggest piece that I could find at my local art store, 38 by 50 inches. And I started feverishly dusting just with a dry brush. And it was just the brush I had. Here, I could grab it quick. And here's one of them. The other one I can't find. Oh, here it is. So this is the brush I started using back in 2008, and it's still one of my favorites. Here's my other favorite, which, womp womp, it's totally gone. This is after it's been taped together multiple times. So I just used these 2 brushes, and I essentially dusted my first graphite drawing in like 4 hours. And at the time, like dust was flying everywhere, which in retrospect, I've found out since then, it's like not good for your health. But also since then, my process has become a lot cleaner and more refined. And so the graphite comes in a peanut butter jar like this. We won't show the brand because it's not a commercial, right? Unless you guys want to see it. Whatever, it's Generals. It doesn't have a health warning on it, so if I get sick.
There you go. They should be branding you. You should, you know. I say they should be almost like branding you at this point, you know, for all the time you have the money you spend investing in them and their product. Wait a minute, Melissa, I want to ask you a quick question. When you were saying like you've spent dusting for 4 hours, the paper, do you mean, so you just covered the whole, it took you 4 hours to just cover the entire sheet like completely, or what do you mean by that?
So what I did is I, before I start dusting, I do like the basic proportions. So I lay out the image, and then the dusting, back then it went from like dark marks, like hair strands and little details. And then I would slowly erase away details and then dust in more, and like brush in, dry brush in more details. So it's this additive subtractive process. So I don't cover the entire image. Here, there's a couple different levels of stuff going on here. This is something in progress. So you can see that the surface, I lay out kind of basic values.
Mm-hmm.
And then after putting down some basic values, sorry, I gotta put down that graphite. Let's see my cinematography. So here's like an eraser mark. And after erasing that, I'll put more graphite on. So it's erased, but there's another thin layer over it, if you can tell that from the screen. And so slowly build up that surface. So for example, this is an in progress image that I have going. There's all these different hairs, and most of the hairs are created by erasing. So by erasure, like a subtractive process. And so each hair is kind of erased away, and then I put more thin layers of graphite on top of it. So it slowly builds up that texture and the value, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Are you spraying in between, or you don't spray until the very, very end?
No, I don't spray till the
You
very
ever spray?
end. Oh, here you can see some thin, like erased away lines, but then there's dark graphite on top. So you can see how I like slowly build that up. Yeah, and the fixative is only at the very end because it kind of changes the texture of the paper. And back in what, 2010, 2011, maybe between 2009, 2010, I had some drawings that I had put away and I thought were done, but by the time like 2011, 2012 came, I had refined the technique so much that I actually worked back into them. And it works because I use workable fixative. The surface isn't quite as nice because it almost gets pebbly or sticky or something.
And everything you're working on there is a hot press, right?
It's
cold.
It's,
But I mean, is it like a hot press Stonehenge, or is it cold? Because hot press meaning smooth.
oh yeah, I think it's so it's not classified as either because I know there's normally like hot and cold press. I don't think the Stonehenge that I get is normally classified as anything. It's like there's a certain weight to it. I think it's 90 gram. There's a higher thickness one, but that one only comes in smaller sheets for some reason. But it's a mostly smooth surface. There's a really slight texture to it. Let me see if
so those are pretty thin then. So at 90 pounds, that's not too heavy.
Yeah, I don't know if you got
yeah, I can see it.
or anything. Yeah, is it a 90? Like 120 or something. Is it possible? Oh, here's the flip the camera. Sorry, I'm still like semi-new to Google Meet. So here's there's my finger. Sorry, guys, my cinematography. Here's my papers. So this is the 38 by 50. Oh, that's slightly cut down. And then this is where I store some of my older drawings. Right now I have a show up in Minnesota, so a lot of my drawings are not in here. I can't fully pull it up. I actually have a stop motion animation set up for this one to show the whole process. So if you check out my Instagram, maybe in like a week or two, it should hopefully be posted. But here's the juicy banana.
Yeah.
Some other stuff. Here's like a drawing from, I think, 2009, 2010. I used to do all these different characters. And so this is actually a self-portrait, but in drag. So I got a mustache.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I kind of saw some resemblance with that.
Yeah, I used to do all these personas and whatnot. Oh, here's one of the first series that I did. It was all masks. So I only have a couple of these. Here's a pig. Yeah, so these are the old style. I used to do some pencil marks in these. Sorry, it's hard to hold. So you can see wait, where did my camera go? You can see right here, there's a thin pencil line, and I used to do smudge stick too. Now I don't do any of that. So now, if you look at the surface, here's something in progress. But it's a skull vodka vase with flowers from my yard. But you can see kind of the textures and whatnot. But no pencils except for when I'm really lightly laying out. Can you see that kind of? Yeah,
definitely.
Just to lay out the proportions. And now I'm doing some techniques actually with stencils. So this kind of mark making is very different than what I used to do. It's got like this sharpness that wasn't in my drawings before. And so this is an in progress face, skull head. So you can see down here, I have a lot more building up to do, but here there's a lot of those layers of value. So what I usually do is I start with the basic shapes, the basic values, and from there I add more and more details or dimensions. So it goes from general to specific, and usually, light to dark. Yeah, so that's a bit of the technique. Let's see. I'm on my phone. My computer is dead. Like gone forever.
Oh,
I know. Awful in a pandemic to not have a computer. But let's see. I could share my screen and try to show you guys some videos, or do you have any specific questions you want me to talk about, or?
well, I'm wondering about, how are you deciding your narrative with with your work, and then in terms of the scale that you just decided to really kind of focus on is, tell us a little bit about just your narrative or the scale and how that kind of works together, or how you choose to put these pieces together. Like, do you like any of the ones behind you, like, are you working with photography and then kind of cropping it down there, or is everything just like kind of coming out of your head as you're working, or so
So my process for essentially most of my drawings has been to start with like a basic concept or inspiration, and I tend to be inspired a lot by life, by relationships, by my environment, by my surroundings, sometimes what's happening in the world in general. And so some of those first drawings, like the one where I was in drag, I was inspired by relationships. So I would, and various life events. So I would dress up as these different personas in order to process these things that had happened in my life. So back then there was a very performative element to my work. And I would essentially think of a character and kind of think of a mood, and then essentially like act things out in front of a camera, that same camera that I have set up doing my stop motion with a little remote control. So I would take all these photos and then I would kind of sift through them to see what ones I thought were interesting compositions, kind of interesting moods, something that I felt like would resonate. And then after that, I would get my big piece of paper out, lay out those basic proportions, and then start working with a graphite. But then when I moved to New York, a lot of that performative element kind of I put on the back burner, because I felt like being one of millions of people really changed my idea of who I was. Like, so I used to live in Madison, so I felt like I could be this real kind of character and embrace that character. But in New York, you're competing with so many people that I think I got a lot more introspective in my work and became less performative. And also I was in a relationship at that point, so I wasn't going like processing dating world. So it really changed my my subject matter as well. And so in New York, I started kind of departing from those self-portraits and started thinking about ways of abstracting the figure. So I would either pour paint on myself or paint my face, or I did a series of like in the bath water. So it became about kind of the act of painting and drawing on myself, photographing that, and then drawing from that photo. So it became kind of like this relationship between all these different medias. And then after doing that for a while, I started doing some still lifes, like found still lifes in Brooklyn, of like just crazy things that you'd find on the side of the road, like a full wig in the weeds. That was a fun drawing to do. That it was like these moments where you feel like you came upon a story, but you don't really know what the narrative was, and that was always interesting to me. And there was always these kind of hints of the figure and of, I don't know, this conversation that was happening in the city. And so I also got into, if you guys are familiar with trompe l'oeil, kind of like to trick the eye, where artists back in the day would, or still I guess, would set up these still lives on their wall where it'd be like images that are tacked, sometimes little trinkets and other textures like on a bulletin board, and they would draw or paint from there. And so I started using these found graffiti in that same way, but then I would layer on my own marks, so it became this conversation with the city. And I was really into that because I was drawing like these torn pieces of paper, and I have kind of an element of one of those. This is a newer one that unfortunately I think is going to get trashed because the scale is not working for some of this stuff. Anyways.
Well, explain to us that, because we can't see what you see.
Okay. So I love this. So this, I'll finish this off. So after leaving New York, I moved here and had kiddos, but Minneapolis doesn't have that same kind of wheat paste posters graffiti scene.
No,
so
it is not.
the thing I was really excited about, I was like, well, now what? And so after having kids, I realized that like they leave graffiti everywhere. So I started thinking about that same kind of gestural quick mark, but in a very different voice. And so I started drawing my 3 and 4, she's now 4, but 3-year-old's drawings at the time. And so this is one of those. So here we have the crumpled piece of paper of her gestural marks on top of a coloring page. But then I had a photo of her. So this was like a still life of my refrigerator.
Yeah.
This is about 37 by 37 inches. But then this photo of her, I don't like drawing small. Like I like really kind of harking back to the critique I received in grad school, is like I was doing these small drawings that were time intensive and, tiny. And I'd be sitting at the desk, well, with my right hand doing this. And now my drawings are actually quite physical. So I draw on the wall, like I tape this stuff up, make a few marks, and then walk back. And so it's this very physical process. And actually when I'm drawing, it's almost like I'm scrubbing the paper with anything soft. So instead of doing this, I'm like doing these big marks, which I like that energy and I like that physicality. So when I started doing this, I was like, I just can't get myself excited about it. And then I started thinking about trying to incorporate pencil again. So we have a little, sorry, my cinematography, pencil, Cinderella. And then we've got like a photo strip. So there was a lot of shifts in scale in this. So like this, I think really was strong and made sense. And I like kind of that sculptural element of the paper. But then when I got down to having to do something that tiny or this tiny, it just wasn't, it felt like something was falling flat. So that is going to be one of the ones that end up in the garbage. But I left it on the wall because I like that kitty cat.
I know. That's why I was like, why?
And then I thought, well, maybe I could like cut it down. But one of the tricks is like, since I taped the paper onto the wall, I have to kind of be really sure of those boundaries, because I would have 2 white edges and not. And then I've cut it just like a section of something out, and it just feels so unfinished without that edge. It feels like unintentional in a way.
Okay, so like no full bleeds. Got it.
Yeah.
And that's because of like just like the handling of the drawing and stuff too. Is that, you know, part of it, like just because that's the one thing about pencil. I mean, it's just there's only so much fixative, and then there's just the realities, right? So, but isn't, I mean, it's just interesting that, so do you think that part of it is that you just felt like you weren't feeling totally engaged in that part of the drawing, and so because of that you feel like the investment is not there for yourself, and so therefore it's not going to translate into the work, and so therefore you're ultimately deciding to just stop?
Yeah, that's a good summary of it. I think also, so back when I was in grad school, I had a bedroom that I drew in, or it was in between grad school and I don't know, Brooklyn. I was living in Madison, and I had a bedroom that the floor slowly got covered in graphite, and I would draw on an easel. So I only could draw one drawing at a time. And then I actually met my now husband at an artist residency, Bemis. It's in Omaha. And it's a huge, you get like a huge live-in space. And so, God, it was like 600 square feet or more than that. It was like you could have fit 3 bedrooms in this space. It was beautiful. And I was so used to doing one thing at a time. And I remember Eric being like, you have all of these walls, like make more, or like have more than one thing going. And for some reason at that time, my brain didn't think that way, because especially like if you think about school, you usually have one project going per class. And that's usually based on media. Like I used to be a printmaker actually. So I would have like a screen print and a litho and all these different things going, but it was only one thing at a time. And so my brain hadn't really thought about having 5 things going at once. And now that I do, and I have this space, I like to have about 5 things going, because kind of touching back on what you said, Emily, is like sometimes you hit this point in a piece that you feel disengaged, or you feel like you're struggling. And when I used to only have that one piece on my easel, sometimes it would sit there for like a week or 2 or sometimes months, and then I would be making nothing. So having multiple things going sometimes gives you that perspective. Like for me, there's certain things that like once I have an idea and I start doing a drawing, sometimes things can go together really fast. Like this drawing right there, that one, that's like maybe 3 or 4 days worth of work.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it went
You're a machine. I mean, I know you know I know it's your thing, you know, but for us, I mean, that's an amazing feat. I mean, do you feel like it just worked? There was just a flow?
Well, and something that I've always been kind of excited about drawing is hair. Like I love drawing hair, and I've been thinking about hair specifically because I feel like I was weirdly thinking about actually art history class back when I was in undergrad, and I took a Japanese printmaking class, and I remember him being like, you can tell the different master printers by the way they do their ear. Like everyone has a very specific ear. And I started thinking about that and thinking about how a lot of artists I know who do hair, they have a very specific way of doing hair themselves. And so I've actually been kind of struggling with this idea of photorealism versus kind of my artistic liberties that I take. And I feel like hair is something that I have a specific way of doing. And I think if I keep going more hair, that I could maybe get away from being so reliant on the photo, because I feel like that's one of the things that I'd like to step away from, is being so dependent on the photo.
Interesting.
So, but hair also helps me go fast. Like I can do drawings fast if it's hair, specifically
Wow.
hair.
Wow. I mean, you know, for so many of us, hair is so challenging. But I think, I mean, how is it that you go so fast? Is it just like you just, do you think it's just because of the subtractive, you know, layering that way that works the best versus if you were drawing it? Because I think, is that why, you know? Like,
I don't know. It's just, I love drawing hair. I don't know. I wish I
yeah.
had more academic reason for why it goes fast.
No, I'm not looking for academic reason. No, but I think it's interesting because I feel like part of you just like sees it in your mind so much, and so there's so much just like innate intuitiveness with hair for you, the way it's translated. Like there's something, because what we don't see in your studios, I don't see you drawing next to, you know, I think about Ryan, you know, and his work, and when I would watch him work, and he always had that computer, he'd shoot the model and have the printout right next to him, and then be looking back and forth all the time. Obviously, because with his eyes, he was really having to do that. But with you, we don't see any photography right next to your pieces. So are you like, do you like, oh.
Here, I'll take you. So here we have some inspiration wall going on. But here's a few photos that I'm using. So we've got my color photo, some, you know, the full image, and then a zoom in. But with hair, I don't really need as many details because I think it's because I've drawn specifically my hair so many times that I know how it functions. And if we look at some of the older hair, like it just doesn't quite have as much dimensionality. I mean, some of the eyebrow hairs are kind of nice.
You mean it's not so crisp in terms of, I get it, yeah.
So here, if you see, this is one of my early drawings, so 2009, 2010. But see, if I went back into this would just be like essentially the early stages now. So you can see a few highlights in the hair and some dark shadows. But also things are just like a little bit, they've got a smudgier quality. And then here is another drawing that's kind of just in progress. This one, though, I wasn't as excited about. So like I pulled this one out and it just banged it out essentially.
Yeah.
But this is almost the same kind of, what is the word? The same level of completion that complete drawing is. But this is just the start, you know?
Yeah.
So it's over, what, 10 years, 11 years. So here's the couple images that I have going for this. What's tricky is when I do different textures and different subject matter, sometimes it can be a good challenge on how to think or how to see something or how to convey that image. But
that makes sense. And do you also feel like just, and going back and forth between the pieces, that it allows you to not overwork in a way?
Yeah.
You know, and to kind of keep it really fresh so that you kind of keep it moving and keep challenging yourself to just kind of keep your eye looking and just seeing the narrative between them, but also being able to like just objectively be able to step back a little bit to keep kind of resetting. Yeah.
Well, and I think the other thing that's nice about doing multiple things at once is that you can really, if I get sick of doing hair, I can do something totally different. so it keeps me engaged. And, sometimes you're just in a mood to do something different. And what was nice, I have a show up in Minnesota right now at St. John's University, outside of St. Cloud. And some of those drawings, there's some very different techniques and moods in them. Like I was going to try to share my, now, bear with me because this will be, okay, let's see, share screen. Start screen broadcast.
Yeah, start presenting, then you just kind of click on the little click.
Start.
Oh. You go to the bottom, you go start presenting, and then yeah, exactly.
Okay, so now, do you guys still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, oops, not that one. Drawing presentation. So here is some of the images from that show. So this is a drawing that I did of a doily that my daughter drew a flower on. And what really I was interested in that is that you've got like the doily texture and like that really intense high contrast detail, but you also have like that representation of a flower on the doily and then her representation of a flower. So I thought that was kind of an interesting idea. Well, and I love trying to create that texture, like that really carefree, unself-conscious mark that she has. I love the way that children draw. They draw with such vigor.
Yeah.
And this is another kind of idea of combining that with my figure. So she drew on my face at the beginning of quarantine. It was like a month in, back when we thought that it was only going to be like a month or whatnot. I started letting them, do whatever to make them happy because we were stuck in the house together. So I let them draw on my face. So she gave me kitty cat whiskers. But it was fun to draw this. It was essentially graffiti on my face. So I get to still draw the hair, but then I also get to try to replicate her mark making on top of my skin, which, has some wrinkles and some shininess, which is, I think, fun to combine those textures. And then here, this will be good for you guys. This is this drawing in my studio right now. This is the first hour of work. So just a time lapse on my phone. So you can see that I'm laying out those basic graphite values. So kind of the sections of the hair, I go in, add a little bit of detail, and then I'll keep building up that value. So I add enough detail to kind of not lose my spot, if that makes sense. And then build up the value and the textures. So that is 1 hour of work. Here's another. This is mom brain. So it was my take on that. Sometimes I see other photorealists drawing French braids. And so this is like my mom version where I thought those moments when you leave the house and you think you look presentable. And then realize once you get home that your kid had put a sticker on your butt like hours ago and you'd been watching or what. So I was actually inspired by one day I was doing a visit with a whole bunch of collectors, and my daughter was maybe a year or two at that time. And I thought I was like really working the mom game where I was like holding her and giving this presentation, and I thought I was on point. And then afterwards, one of my friends who was there, he was like, just so you know, your daughter was wiping her nose in your hair the whole time. Old. So I was like, okay, I gotta do something with this. So that was what that drawing was inspired by.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I love it. No, it's good. That's the good stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, they can't help themselves, and those hands are just sticky. They just are. There's a lot coming out, and they're just going out, and there's just a lot, yeah, I taught preschool, so I mean, in elementary, and so like I can remember, but it's fun. But and obviously, just there's just the way that they're translating in their language and their marks and how they're just the whole idea of just the object, the thing, the naming, and everything that kind of how they're responding to the environment. It's so it's so great to see how you are seeing through their eyes in a different way, and also just kind of I don't know, getting like in touch with certain aspects of your own practice in terms of your own mark making, and how you're seeing, kind of allowing yourself to keep making progress in the studio, and asking, because I mean, I would almost say in a sense that you are more of a photoreal, you border that line of photorealism with your work, but there's also so much narrative though with your work. There's also this like photography, and there's this glimpse of, there's some moment, there's this element of time and dialogue and conversation, and then you have the scale involved. So, there's other things that are in the conversation where it's not just about representing this thing in front of you. It's definitely about kind of invoking this sort of essence and presence with it as well, where it's not, there's that activity going on. So it's interesting.
I always hope like an element of poetry almost in the images.
Yeah, and also because of the fact that you are working with that powder. It's not there as much definition and sharp clarity that you're bringing out with those works. It's not sketchy, right? But it's also, what was I going to say? There's alluding to this poetryness that you're talking about, this sort of fog in between, this idea of something emerging out and kind of emerging into focus in and out, that the material has really helped to translate. And I feel like I'm hogging all the airspace, you guys. Does anybody want to ask Melissa a question or have anything to say so far? Let's see.
How do you deal with the smudging?
So I noticed that some of the people that I follow on Instagram set up like these really elaborate masks on the paper. Like they'll tape these, I'm assuming like a tracing paper or a vellum. I do not do that. So I think it's just practice, to be honest. Like those first drawings that I was showing you, going through my archive, those are a lot smudgier than these. I think drawing on the wall probably helps, because if you're like physically on top of the drawing, I feel like there's more smudging that naturally happens because, your arm's on it and everything's on it. For the most part, I don't really have my hand on it too much. And
I would think standing up is, it's like, you're not gonna like fall on it. You're not gonna lean on it. You're not gonna rest on the drawing, right?
There's like probably should have done my nails beforehand.
Artist.
There's a bit of smudging, but some of that you can erase away. So a little bit of smudging, but I can take some of that away later on. So here, a little smudging. But for the most part with these, except for where I taped it, so you can see my dirty little fingerprints, and that'll erase away super easy. I tend to not be quite as precious with my paper and whatnot. I feel like it's not necessary. Like through trial and error, I have ruined some drawings or some paper in history. But now I essentially know how to how to work it that it doesn't get too dirty or too wrinkled. Oh, here's a little smudge. This one would be tricky because, so this was inspired by, since this pandemic, I have been taking daily walks with the family to get I have a 4-year-old and a 20-month-old. And so we get the 20-month-old to bed by taking her for a walk at nap time. And this was the local high school that's a few blocks away. When they all graduated, this was hanging up. It says congrats. So, but this is C-O, the ends in the behind grats. And I thought it was kind of encapsulated the mood of a COVID graduation. It's just like,
Yeah.
hazard and depressing. So that's that image, but there's a lot of white space. So I'm also not sure if I'm going to finish this one. It's going to take a while because I think one of the things I like to have more of a sense of space or place in these, and I didn't want to draw the gymnasium. So I'm trying to think if I'm going to draw some shadows behind the balloons or like I liked with this one how a shadow just kind of gives it a sense of place, and I might do something behind it as well. And then this one I decided to go dark background.
Yeah. I like the choice to go dark with the background. I think it's because she's also wearing the mask and that she's also like going to get through the darkness, and she's almost like a superhero with that mask, kind of in a way, like she's tied, but she's kind of looking ahead. You can't tell if she's in danger or not, and her hair is coming in front. So there's a lot of theatricalness to that piece, at least for me.
Yeah.
But she's like looking up. There could be a UFO coming. You're not really sure, but in this one too, like they're kind of there's a little bit of element of danger in their eyes, and the hair wrapping around the face to kind of tie them in is it's like she's kind of protecting herself and tying herself in at the same time. So
and also kind of like a warrior, a little bit like a.
No, that's exactly what I was saying. Like I said superhero, but I think, like she's kind of going at it, and like I got myself protected and I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
But I like the sort of the idea that she's got that braid going down at the same time in front. Is she's still holding on to her femininity. And there's something very like ancient about how like they used to wear their hair and braid their hair back because they all had that really long hair back in the day, and how they would wrap it all up and then it would come down out of the helmets. I don't know, like there's a lot of sort of like old narratives that are going on that is I find very interesting in those.
I like that. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that old school braiding element.
Yeah, like how they would braid along the sides and kind of roll it, and I'm not saying like Jedi, it's like Star Wars, but still, there's a lot of that going on. So
yeah, a lot of my drawings have been really inspired by quarantine, especially quarantine with kiddos this past 6-7 months. And so that show that I mentioned, all of those drawings were essentially created since the pandemic started. So, 7 months or whatnot, because I had plans for other drawings, like this one was supposed to be in the show and it never really made it. And some of the drawings ended up getting put on the back burner because I felt like the mood wasn't quite right after facing the pandemic and everything happening in the world right now. So I actually took a lot of drawings down and started new ones that had kind of this quietness and introspection and solitude and whatnot that I feel like a lot of people are facing right now.
Yeah, but I also think that many of us felt that like there was I don't know, the work, we paused on certain pieces because it just didn't feel timely to present them, or it we didn't feel like we were completely in alignment with them as well at the same time. And, you know, it's very, very interesting how it affects the artist and ideas of what kind of we are able to continue making.
Yes.
And also feel in alignment with it too, you know, especially when we're doing work that is it has some of our own biographical, you know, narratives with it alongside and our environment. We're translating it. It's kind of, you know, you want to almost you're honoring the same messages that come out of you as they were. It all changed so abruptly. It took us all. It's still taking us all a minute or two.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely.
But well, thank you for sharing so much of your work with us. I don't know if anyone has any other questions for Melissa about her process. I'm going to ask you some really basic ones. So like that masking tape, are you just using like artist tape? Mm-hmm. You're just using artist tape for that?
Yeah, I find that if I leave the artist tape on too long, sometimes it tears off a little bit of the paper, but since the drawing's done and it's a border, I feel like it's okay. Even if there's like a little bit of tear away of the paper. It won't tear off the edges, it'll just give it almost a different texture at some points.
And so when you're transporting these, are you rolling them inside out? Like, are you rolling them on the outside, and then how are you wrapping them? Or do you wrap them with archival paper?
I use
tubes,
glycine in between, and then I ship it in tubes. Let me see.
Because when I ship my flat work, my prints and stuff, I do a tube. So I'll roll the drawing onto the tube with glassine, and then I wrap it again, then I put it in another tube, so I don't put them actually in the tubes. I actually roll on the outside.
Yes. Sometimes I do the double tube technique. If I'm shipping, I do the double tube technique where I do the inner tube, which is usually about 4 inches, and then the drawings on that, but I usually do drawing in. I don't know why. And then a little bubble wrap, and then they ship in these tubes. Tubes like this. Sorry, this is my dirty closet. So that's just storage right now. There's some big drawings. That's the trick with doing really big drawings. So, oh, my bike helmet. Is that some of those big drawings get a little bit trickier to ship. They all still fit in the tube, but I find that those, for some reason, are more likely to get damaged in transit or in hanging. I've had a few that have gotten usually just hurt along the edge, which is one of the practical reasons for doing that border, because in the worst case scenario, I've been able to cut off the edge of the entire image, and then it's fine. But also sometimes if something gets a little bit wrinkled, you can actually use like a little paper iron, like it's an archival little iron, and iron it like a shirt because it's cotton.
I had no idea there was such thing as a paper iron. I can't believe I didn't know that.
Yeah.
No, I would have just used a regular iron and just put glassine or tissue before, and then kind of gone on the paper. But
yeah, and I think for the most part that should be fine, especially if maybe you double up the glycine, or maybe put another piece of paper, like put glycine and paper on top almost as a buffer, because the nice thing about a paper iron is it's got a slight curve to it. So when you iron, you're not going to get like that, you know how irons normally have that triangle front?
yeah.
That goes in to the paper and leaves like a little divot. Like
Yeah,
the
yeah, definitely. No, I definitely, I'm fascinated. Fascinated. I want like a mini one. I don't know. I mean, it's a very common thing to have. It's
they're like tiny. I used to be a bookmaker. I think that's why I have it. I have like so many random art supplies from over my history. I've only just started like Marie Kondoing some of them away, like oil paint that I haven't used in like 15 years or something.
I'm like, I didn't even know you even used oil paint. I
No,
mean,
the only person who owns one of my oil paintings is my parents, and I've tried to burn it, but they won't let me. I even attempted to replace it for them, but they like my silly bear painting, whatever.
that's gonna be you too, though. You know,
Yeah.
it's gonna be you too. Well, thank you so much.